Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Family Health Forum. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Should you require assistance from an operator during the conference at any time, you may press a star then zero. It's now my pleasure to turn the conference over to our host, Senator Anthony Portantino. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everybody, for being on the call. Welcome to our COVID-19 Family Health Forum. I'm pleased to be co-hosting this forum with First District PTA. We have Diane Hyland from First District PTA on the call as well. We'll say a couple things when I'm done. Our purpose today is to try to help families who are at home. This is a unique situation. I can't ever imagine thinking that we would all be on a sort of a self-isolation, social distancing for this length of time. And so as a dad myself, it's a unique experience with my two daughters and my spouse at home with us. And so we were hearing lots of questions and concerns about how families can best position themselves to move forward in a healthy social manner. And so that was the genesis of our call. We're going to hear from Diane Hyland and then four marriage and family therapists who are going to do an introduction, talk a little bit about themselves and some of the things they were hearing. After the introductions, we have taken in a number of questions prior to the forum, and so we're going to go through the questions that have been submitted. I encourage folks, they can still email questions who are listening at home. You can still email questions, and time permitting, we'll get to those questions as well. After we do about 25 questions, we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the call to talk about next steps moving forward and some strategies, things that we didn't touch upon during the conversation. And so I just want to say welcome and thank you to everybody who's listening, both dialed in and also online at our website. So thank you for joining us for this important topic, and I'll introduce the presenters after Diane says a few words. Welcome and introduction. So again, my co-host from the First District PTA is their president, Diane Hyland. So Diane, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're on the call.
Good morning. I'm Diane Velasco-Hyland, the president of First District PTA. We represent about 85,000 members from Burbank to Pomona. We are part of an umbrella organization, the California State PTA, that has about 750,000 members, and then the National PTA that has about 3.5 million members. And what we do is we look out for children. We are the voice of all children, wanting to make sure that our public education system serves our members, our parents, our families, and our educators in a way that will always do the best thing for children. We want to thank Senator Portantino and the marriage and family therapists that are on the call today, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of the questions that are hitting all of us right now. Senator?
Thank you, Diane, and it's great to partner with First District PTA. Again, we've conducted a number of mental health first aid forums, and it's a great partnership with an organization that just really wants kids and families to be healthy and happy. So thanks for being on the call with us. We also are joined with four licensed marriage and family therapists. Lara Mkhitaryan. Lara, I'm sorry I butchered your name, and I apologize for that. Lara is an LMFT. We have Anna Marie Rossi, who's also a licensed marriage and family therapist. We have Nora Chitillian, who is an MFT and specializes in both typical and special needs children. So we're going to deal with a few questions dealing with special needs children. And we have George Holbrook, who's an MFT and the clinical director of Family Services Agency. So we've got clinicians who are in private and public practice. We have acute specialties and also a service provider of mental health services, FSA. So we tried to have a broad spectrum of experts who are going to introduce themselves over the next 25 minutes, and then we're going to go right into our questions. I'm going to try to keep this moving because I know everybody's busy today and you want to get to the to the heart of the matter, which are the questions that have been sent in. So Anna Rossi is our first MFT who's going to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her observations. So Anna, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Diane, for both of you for hosting such an important event on family health. So yes, my name is Anna Marie Rossi. I'm an MFT, and I have a private practice in Pasadena, California. I work with children and teens. That is my specialty. I'm a Pasadena native, so I do feel strongly about supporting the youth in our community. My clients have all transitioned to video therapy for the time being, and I must say I'm so grateful for the technology that exists because it keeps us connected, while we're staying at home. A few of the challenges that my clients are facing are, firstly, some really strong feelings, disappointment, anger, sadness, about the important events in their life that are canceled due to COVID-19. Senior prom, theater performances, sporting events, and quite possibly graduation. I'm also seeing sleep challenges, a change in routine. Children and teens are home, not getting as much activity, so they get bored, they nap during the day, then they can't sleep at night, they're not getting physical exercise, so they're restless, staying up late, talking to friends or playing video games, and sometimes just feeling a lot of anxiety, and that makes it hard to sleep. So sleep has been an issue, and also, I've got to say, teens wanting time away from family. Tensions are high in the home. Parents are stressed. Teens, they just want to see their friends and have some independence, which is totally normal in their stage of development, but it's quite difficult to do at the moment, So I'm encouraging families to give space, but to also stay connected. It's a real balancing act. Some strategies that can be helpful for this anxiety, the stress, the sleep issues are, I'm a real fan of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the act of purposely bringing your attention to the present moment. And when things feel chaotic, when there's stress, when we're anxious, mindfulness can really help quiet that chatter. So, just eat an orange and fully eat an orange. I know that sounds silly, but peel it, smell it, try to be mindful. There's great apps that can help you learn mindfulness. So, Calm and Headspace, to name a few, those are helpful. And staying busy, right? I know when emotions feel too overwhelming, try to get busy, keep your mind occupied, journaling, art, exercise. And I have to say, lastly, just be compassionate with yourself and others. Remember, we can't solve all the problems right now, so sometimes just validating each other or your children's feelings, it goes a long way. Saying, I know this is hard right now. I see that you're frustrated. So that's a few things. I hope it helps, and I'm looking forward to answering some of your more specific questions. And thanks again for having me.
Fantastic. We'll go to Laura. Laura, please introduce yourself and give us a few opening comments, and take it away.
Sure. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Senator Portantino and Ms. Highland, for inviting us to join you today for the town hall. Again, my name is Laura Meketarian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I have a group practice out in the La Crescenta Valley called Heal the Hurt Counseling. I've been a trauma specialist for the greater part of a decade now, and I've worked heavily with trauma survivors, traumatic grief, which we're seeing a large influx of now, and first responders in a variety of settings. So part of my work includes providing employee assistance for the frontline workers at a major hospital who've been dealing with the COVID crisis day in and day out. And I have to say I've been seeing the emotional resiliency that each of these responders are tuning into to take care of all of us and our loved ones affected by this crisis. And I'm also seeing how their families are making such great sacrifices and how it's impacting relationships, family, health, and the bravery with which these men and women are facing this crisis is, I mean, it's astounding that they're doing as much as they are. And I know that their families are paying a high price for that too. So they're getting it from both ends. I think the other thing too that's very concerning is that, you know, springtime is the most increased time for suicides. And now given this crisis, we're seeing an increase in the suicidal ideations, whether it's teens, whether it's doctors, frontline workers, folks who got laid off, people who lost a loved one they couldn't say goodbye to. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of people internally struggling, and I think being ready for how people are going to be faced with this illness and how important it is to be prepared with tools and resources is crucial in trying to minimize the damages we're going to be seeing. I feel like another piece to this is we're all really experiencing a collective loss during this time, and I think being surrounded by as much support as possible makes a big difference. I mean, like I had mentioned, there's people who can't mourn a loved one. They couldn't be with them when they passed away because of the virus, or they have a family member who's working at the hospital who's coming home sick and then isn't able to be around family or get that support. So I think building a really good, almost like a toolbox of resources people could reach for during this time, I think is going to be very important. And I'm hoping that all of us can collectively offer things that can help everyone get through this time, because I know it's really difficult. The other thing that I would add is, you know, as therapists, we are trained for exactly these types of situations. So my biggest advice would be reach out to our community, reach out to the professionals, let them be there to support you. And I know that there's a bunch of resources out there for people who are struggling. And I'm glad that we get to be a part of this conversation and to do our piece in helping bring our community along throughout this epidemic. And that's my spiel.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks for being on the call. Nora, you're up next.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Nora Chitilian, licensed marriage and family therapist. Thank you, Diane Hyland and Senator Portantino, for this opportunity. It's an honor for me to be part of this panel. So my practice is in Glendale. I'm in private practice, and I am specialized in children and parenting, and children including special needs children. I am a founding member of the Armenian Autism Outreach Project, and I also very closely work with many private schools providing counseling and on-site support for teachers, parents, and students. So just like the other therapists mentioned, we are seeing heightened anxiety in kids, but also in parents. A lot of parents are also anxious. What we're seeing is the uncertainty, the routine have been changed abruptly, so there's the financial hardship, there's a lot of difficulties with the unknown. And what has been helpful with my work with my clients is to really self-reflect, a lot of self-reflection, to determine our needs and wants. A lot of kids have displaced frustration. There's a lot of sadness, and kids don't know how to share their feelings, how to talk about their feelings. And it's important for us as parents or as professionals to be mindful that kids are not misbehaving. Kids are not becoming rebellious. Kids are not just, doing things to make our days miserable. They're going through a lot of different feelings, and we need to recognize, that each feeling could be from another, like I said, displacement. So, for example, a child may be yelling at the parent that I don't want to watch this movie at a movie night, but that anger could be related to, I'm so sad I don't get to see my friend. So we got to be a little bit more understanding and see how we can help these kids really share their feelings. So what I'm finding helpful is gratitude journal, where they can reflect on their day and maybe focus on what made them grateful about that day. And it could be a person too, who made me feel grateful today. And I'm also going to focus on the special needs families, where they had a ton of support, including ABA services, behavioral health, occupational therapy, speech therapy, respite care, and all of a sudden those services are very limited, and for some, none are available. So I want to make sure all the parents are working on their self-care to be able to tackle all of these issues, hopefully sooner than later. And also I'm going to focus on 3 Ps, the letter Ps, and the importance of planning, praising, and participating. And as parents, we have to make sure to focus on those 3, and I'll get into those with the upcoming questions later. So that's it for now.
Thank you, Nora. George, you're with FSA. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your practice, what you're doing, and some thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, everybody, for giving me this opportunity to be on this panel as well. Yes, my name is George Holbrook, and I'm a licensed marriage family therapist, and I have over 30 years of experience providing services. I've been the clinic director for Family Service Agency of Burbank for over 20 years. And Family Service Agency is a community-based, not-for-profit counseling center that's been serving the city of Burbank and the surrounding communities for over 66 years. It provides a wide array of counseling services to all age groups. One of its main programs is it does have a domestic violence support program, and we have domestic violence support groups for survivors of domestic violence. We have parenting classes, and we have a very large school-based counseling program that's in partnership and collaboration with the Burbank Unified School District. So we have counselors, currently, not now, but we have counselors at all the schools in the Burbank district. And what we've done is we've moved our services through the telehealth platforms, and we're still providing services to a lot of the family and children that we were providing prior to the outbreak of the virus. So what we're seeing is a lot of the things that was just mentioned by the other presenters on the panel. I agree fully with everything that was said. One of our main focuses is really how do we continue to strengthen the family relationships for the clients we're serving. For me personally, as a therapist, family service has been my main focus and goal. And through our services, we're reaching out to our clients, but as well to other family members to kind of help them to bond and reconnect, find new purpose, find new meaning in their family, and also to, put aside differences. This is really, in essence, this is not a time to rehash old wounds and issues. We're trying to find and trying to help the family members reconnect and bond on a level that's more purposeful, more meaningful, and caring. And to me and to our staff, if we can help families do that, they're going to have a much better approach and an opportunity to find ways to deal with all the challenges that are coming.
Awesome. Thank you, George. Thank you, everybody. As I mentioned, we've got some prepared questions that we're going to go to and try to get through as many of the questions as we can, and saving some time for some strategies and wrap up and some real positive direction at the end of the conversation. And so our first question goes to Lara, and it's about something she touched upon, the essential workers. The people who are out there on the front line are family members as well. So many essential workers don't have the ability to stay at home and are providing important services for all of us. They include healthcare workers, public safety, and food delivery service workers. Obviously, they deserve our appreciation. How can we support these essential workers on the front line in general, and then specifically how can essential workers who are not being provided adequate protective equipment, how can a loved one best support these workers mentally and emotionally during this time? And many of these essential workers are also at high risk for contacting COVID-19.
Yeah.
So what can we do to help our essential workers, Laura?
Well, I think there's a variety of things. I think for one, there's so many resources out there right now for them, like food banks or just places. I know that there's certain hospitals that are even paying for them to stay somewhere different so that they don't infect their families. So there are resources out there. I think, when you're working day in and day out, all those hours, it's tough to reach out to find what resources are available at your work. There's always going to be that available, so make sure to check that. I think as far as the workers themselves go, it's true, there isn't enough personal protective equipment to go around. It's very rare. People are more at risk for contracting. People are exhausted. I think in terms of the workers themselves, they need to come up with really solid, good, important self-care strategies that can help them work through this time for everything that they're facing. I think for their families, though, especially, is understanding that, this is something that they have chosen to do. This is why they've picked the profession they've picked, is because they're getting to help a lot of people in need. And, I think they need a lot of support and admiration and being able to tell them, that we're here for you, whatever you need, setting up FaceTime calls if they're working multiple hours, and they can't really see family as much, making it accommodating to them and to their schedule because they are running around a lot. I think that could be huge. In terms of the personal protective equipment, I know for this specific question, they're worried, the person was very worried for their family member. And I don't know how useful this might be, but I know that online they're coming up with different ways you can create some personal protective equipment that, can make you feel a lot safer, like making homemade face masks, let's say, or just coming up with different resources and strategies like that could actually make the person who is struggling feel like they have that support, that somebody's putting some thought into what they're going through. I think also the biggest thing you could do to support first responders, especially if you're their family or close friends, is just give them the space to talk about what they're experiencing. Honestly, more than anything, people right now just need an opportunity to share what they're going through. And, keeping in mind that first responders are in survival mode. They're going, they're on the go nonstop doing what they need to do. They don't have that time to sit back, process, and share what they're feeling. So I think creating that space for them is huge. And I think that could make a very big difference in terms of, feeling like you are doing your part while they are doing their part, if that makes any sense.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Our second question is for Anna. How do you advise divorced parents? I mean, we always have to remember that every family is different. We have lots of folks out there who are split households, divorced households, and so how do you advise divorced parents who share custody to adjust their custody schedules? Parents are struggling with social distancing, and they have set schedules of who's supposed to watch what child on what day. How do we maximize the health and welfare of our children? So there's some families that have court-ordered schedules. I mean, what can we tell divorced families who want to help their children? I mean, we have one person who wrote in that had twins that's struggling with dealing with both the struggles of divorce and the health of their children. What can we tell them?
Yeah, Anthony, divorced parents, they do have a unique challenge right now. I know that a lot of family lawyers are also getting calls about this, like what to do. And so my advice on the emotional side of things is to tell the parents, to really try to communicate and work together, however difficult that may be. And I know that in some cases it is quite difficult for divorced parents to, work together and communicate. but this, during this time, if we can try to really put the children first, I mean, this is stressful for everyone, and children really don't need the added worry of a parental fight over the custody or the child staying longer at one house than the other. You know, they really need the stability and reassurance and connection right now. So I hope for some space for creativity and flexibility with these families. You know, I know some families that are finding it helpful to have longer stays at each house. You know, that seems to help, you know, with like spreading of germs if they're not going back and forth, not as much coming and going, you know, that can be helpful. But, you know, they do need to see both parents, and, you know, that's, you know, so safety of COVID-19 is important, and staying at home is important, but also getting connection and support from both of your parents is very important. So, you know, try to be creative, try to communicate as best you can. If you cannot, then I recommend seeking some help from a family court mediator, possibly, you know, to help come to a compromise during this time. But I know it is challenging, and so those are some of my thoughts and ideas.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Our third question is for Nora. Parents with special needs with special needs children have unique issues. One mom wrote in about her child who missed one whole year of school in 2018 due to improper support, finally got her son situated in a school, and then the school closed because of social distancing. How can she and other parents help special needs children with social distance learning? In particular, parents are looking for behavioral and academic strategies.
All right, thank you, Anthony. So obviously, each special needs child's needs are different, and their supports are very different. And it must be very frustrating for this specific parent where the child has lost a full year of instruction, and now this parent may feel like the child is regressing. However, I think it's very important to feel connected with your therapist, whether they're through the regional center, because regional centers are still open, and or school therapists. And with the help of the therapist, I think it's important to come up with a plan. And I go back to refer to my 3 Ps, to plan the child's day. I know some parents have a hard time with this because the parents may also be working from home, and they may not be able to focus fully with their children's needs. However, when we plan ahead of time, like the night before, and come up with a schedule, and a written one, a visual one, where the child can also see their schedule, just like schools have structured routine. So in those schedules, the visual schedules, you can also put break time, game time, snack time. So that's the planning. And then also to remember to praise, like the token system, because token system works very, very well with special needs children. And children will feel praised and appreciated and validated. And also to make sure that children require and our attention, our emotional attention. So this is where the participation comes in, where aside from our work at home busy life, we should spend time with special needs children, because some of them may have their one-on-one assistance at school where they relied on, the one-on-one help and support. So we have to make sure that we're participating in some kind of an activity in their, daily routine, that there is that human connection, and, make sure that the child's needs are being met as a whole, not just, focusing on the academics. And it's okay that the academics may, fall behind. It's all right. Right now, we got to pay attention to the social and emotional needs of children.
Fantastic. following up, drilling down a little deeper, what about physical activities? Any suggestions for movement, our special needs population, movement during the day? Obviously, trying to get as much physical activity and is important. You want to expand a little bit on that?
Yes, of course. So again, our Armenian Autism Outreach Project, our occupational therapists, we put a list of activities together where families can still make their kids be social and active, physically active at the same time. One of them for kinesthetic needs, you can do Play-Doh work with the kids. You can build forts, actually, for them to physically and creatively be active. You can have a sensory bin and get the kids play with those. You can do gardening if you have space for them to dig up dirt or sand where they can be physically, active. Of course, riding a bike is one of them. Playing hopscotch or jump rope is another fun activity that we can do with the kids. And for more calming one, yoga poses. And some of these activities you can find on YouTube. YouTube has a lot of different videos, and make sure you're screening your YouTube time with your child. Or help around the house with laundry, folding, emptying dishwasher, and again, based on the child's abilities, to really include them in any type of activity around the house. You can do push a ball across the room, or catch a pillow, or catch a ball. You can do finger painting, play tug of war. So there are a lot of different activities that we can still do, and kids can still be physically active. So in order for us, to feel more in control, let's make sure as parents to come up with a list of things we want to do, and let's ask the children, which one they want to do today, so that they can still feel in control and be more interactive. And sometimes we may feel disappointed, and that's okay to feel disappointed that things are not going perfect, because at situations like this with the pandemic, we don't expect for things to be perfect. So just the fact that we validate those feelings with our children is okay, as much as we can normalize the dysfunctional norm, but at least they may feel safe and they'll be more in structured setting. And of course, it's important to do, even though we're doing physical distancing, the other we were talking about this, like social distancing versus physical, we can still be very social and include our special needs kids to be social with their friends through, video calls with their classmates or with their therapists or teachers. I think it's very important to keep that routine going for them to make it more, structured.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nora. George, the next question is for you. An unfortunate part of our reality is domestic abuse. It exists. Now that schools are closed, some people are out of work. Some unlucky people experiencing child, partner, elder abuse are now stuck, frankly, in the most dangerous place, which is their home. And there are more reasons than ever for an abuser to get frustrated, to get mad, to do something inappropriate. How do we get resources to the people who are trapped in these dangerous situations? Will there be more wellness checks for families with histories of domestic abuse? What can we share to that population? What do we need to know, George?
Well, and Anthony, I'm so glad this question's been raised, because we're already seeing in the media and we're already seeing in reports that the incidence of reported domestic violence is going up, and it's extremely unfortunate. And we also know how devastating abuse of any nature, but domestic violence in the home has such extreme negative consequences for not only the victim of the abuse, but also the children and extended family members. So, this is a very serious subject. I think that people who, one of the things that's so challenging for people who are victims of abuse is actually reaching out and getting help, because there's so much feelings of shame and guilt about reporting their abuse and feeling like somehow they're the cause of the abuse. So, the main way to address it is to reach out. Family Service Agency does have a long-term reputation for providing domestic violence services. We have trained staff, and it's an area that you have to approach very carefully because so much is at risk. And one of the things that has to start is, people that are experiencing do have to call. And even over the phone, they can get some guidance. They can understand that there are options. They can understand that there's options to get services for their children. And, there are counselors that can do that. Again, it's something you approach very carefully because of the risk factors. And obviously, there is even some groups, support groups. Family Service has support groups for victims of domestic violence. And we understand there are groups that are forming. We know that the 12-step organization is forming telehealth support groups. I'm suspecting that even with domestic violence, we're going to see groups forming through the same means. But the key is reaching out to other people that are experiencing the same challenges. People really need that kind of support so they understand that it's not about them, they're not unique, that this is very serious, it can have serious consequences, and start addressing it. Start reaching out, find people that can support you, find counselors that can talk to you, walk you through the processes, walk you through the potential options. To me, that's the key. And you can address it from a family approach. Be conscious of the fact that, people are going to have different opinions of why the abuse is occurring. Bottom line, the abuse has to stop, has to be addressed, and families have to find new ways of pulling together and getting to the safe place that they deserve.
Thank you, George. That's unfortunately something we have to deal with in society, and being honest and open about it is important. Thank you, George. The next question, Diane, is going to tackle, and I'll add on as well. We get a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about our senior population, and so what are some of the best practices and resources? What can we say to people who care about our senior population, those who are concerned about our senior population? How can we help that dynamic, Diane?
First and foremost, we're finding that our senior population, and I don't at all mean to generalize, but there are folks that are timid about utilizing technology. And what we're seeing and hearing recommendations is, if you know, whether it's a family member or a neighbor, reaching out by telephone, checking in on them to see that they're okay. I know in some neighborhoods, folks are volunteering to go out and buy needed supplies, whether it's picking up a pharmacy need or groceries. But there are things available. There are programs available both from the state of California. There are websites available if you're interested and you're worried about a family member yourself or someone you know. There's a website called aging.ca.gov that has a tremendous amount of resources available just in general, as well as currently during the COVID-19 crisis. And it's simple things like having a schedule so people don't feel, for example, they may have had a social gathering with other senior citizens and that has been pulled away, or a gathering of some sort to play, a knitting club or a physical activity to go out and do that they can't anymore. So again, it's reaching out to these support systems. There was also questions about telemedicine and some folks not having access to the internet. There is a organization that allows for that. It's and the website is called everyoneon.org/CETF, and we'll have that available afterwards, some of these organizations. But it's internet that is being provided to low-income folks, both senior and otherwise. This is available to any family that is receiving Medi-Cal or has a household income of under $40,000 a year. And many of these organizations, like Spectrum and AT&T, Comcast, they're actually offering free internet to homes that for the next 60 days for free, and then offer low-cost internet anywhere from $10 to $23 a month. It's available.
Well, thank you, Diane. I think the key piece is social distance doesn't mean isolation. And, you know, our friends, neighbors, and family members who are seniors can benefit from a call. Certainly, the most important thing is make sure they have food and health care support and rally to do that with good practices. One newspaper actually came out with a tip and said, encourage our senior population to watch less national news about the coronavirus and to encourage them to enjoy some of the smaller moments in their daily life and try to get some physical activity. So, and don't oversleep. I think that's probably something that should go for both teens and seniors. Don't stay in bed all day. Those are just a couple things for our senior population. George, you're going to get the next question, which in some families, only the parents are outwardly showing signs of stress, and some students seem to act like they're on vacation, which is probably stressing their parents even more. But the question is, are kids hiding their fears from their parents, or are some of our teens and young people hiding the stresses? And so if yes, what should parents try to draw out those fears, confront them? What should we do if we suspect our teens are in a little bit of denial and using some other mechanisms to hide their inner feelings? How should we deal with that dynamic?
Yeah, and it's interesting because our counselors are reporting exactly that some children that we saw at school, because we do the school-based services, so a lot of our counselors are reporting when they're contacting those children at home and they're making that connection every week. They're finding some children that seem a little bit withdrawn when they're at the school are more open and verbal over the phone. And then we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing some children who were, very energetic at school and were very social, but on the phone and talking with their counselor and through the devices, they're a little more shut down. So we're seeing children respond in different ways. The question's kind of focused on, I think it's twofold. Parents certainly are very stressed. We're all very stressed, and I think the key to all of this is understanding that your children are going to respond in a variety of ways, and that doesn't necessarily mean that their response currently is going to be the same a day or so or a week or so from now. We're all going to have shifts in how we're managing this. As the days go by and realities kind of change, we're going to have a different perspective. I don't necessarily believe that parents have to worry about just trying to draw their child's fear out. I do believe that a family should have, a kind of a practice of on a daily basis sitting down with their children, carving out some time that's consistent, and having open conversations of where they are, what they recently heard or saw, and come together and having those dialogues. In that process, they might hear about some concerns that a child really had a difficult time articulating. But now that the question's being asked and the parents are giving feedback and we're getting on and parents are having the opportunity to get on the same kind of same wavelength as their children, and the children are understanding where the parents are. So really the key is opening up dialogue, opening up communication. I don't think it needs to be continuous all through the day, but I do believe it needs to be set aside for a specific time with a specific focus so that children can anticipate it and over time kind of reflect on where each is, developing over the course of the days and weeks, so they get some feedback of how each is handling it. Parents will, have this fear of showing too much of their, negative response. I think giving children the understanding of where you're at helps to prevent children from kind of, getting to, elaborate in their own mind and creating even more fears because they don't have an understanding. So, again, I think family discussions that are consistent would certainly help with this.
Awesome. Thank you. Following up on that to a little bit of a darker side of that, this is about George and Lara. I'm going to ask you, some students, some young people resort to self-harm. I mean, we know there's incidences of cutting, and during this heightened isolation, it seems to be a prime environment to worsen some of these issues. How can we prepare our children better? What can we do about some of these self-harm potential issues?
Well, I think for the first part, it's important to acknowledge that it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be out talking about the fact that they feel suicidal. I think it's more that you have to pay attention to somebody's behaviors if you're seeing them, like they're a lot more isolated and withdrawn than normal, or they're not engaging as much when everybody is home, or you can just see, like, from their energy, what's kind of going on and how to build more communication with especially the younger people in the home, like the teens, I think is so important. I think conversations have to start happening of, like, if you're feeling this way, it's okay. Let's just hear out what's going on so you don't feel like you're in it by yourself. I think just doing simple things like that can go a really long way. If you notice that a loved one or a younger person is really struggling, I mean, there's so much help out there right now available, and of course we have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and as well as like the Suicide Prevention Resource Center too, which has a bunch of different things available. But I think it's just a matter of making sure that the people around you feel like they're being supported, feel like they're being heard, and if you yourself feel like I'm getting to a place that's very hopeless and I don't feel like I'm safe, then reaching out for that support, whether it's calling the hotline, calling 911, going to the nearest emergency room, asking for somebody to help, knowing that there's always options and resources available is huge. And I think that has to be out there a lot.
George, did you want to further talk about some of the self-harm issues and what parents can do for some of these kids that are manifesting their stress through cutting and other things?
Yeah, and I agree with everything Laura said. It's important to recognize all the signs, and the signs can be, pretty extreme. I think that's the key. You're looking for extreme differences in your child and teen. A child that was very withdrawn and then slides into a deeper place might even start acting a little bit more manic and a little higher energy, and people can misread that as meaning everything's okay. You're looking, bottom line, you're looking for the extremes. Extreme in sleeping, extremes in eating patterns, extreme in social connectiveness, extremes in moods, and especially how they communicate with you as a parent. I think the biggest part of this for parents is really focusing on how they react. Someone who's in that dark place, they'll look to the people around them. One of the things that adds to their burden and their emotional burden is feeling guilty for how it affects the people around them. So you want to kind of focus on, you want to come across as open, receptive, kind of monitor some of the things you're going to hear because they can be pretty shocking. And for a lot of parents, the biggest part is that they feel so blindsided by what they didn't know or what they didn't see. So acknowledge that there's going to be things that are going to be surprising and alarming, but manage that emotion, because the key is being able to have open conversations with your teen and really understand the depth of their thoughts and their feelings, and then start to strategize on what the options are. And, there are teen hotlines, there's crisis lines, and hopefully teen support groups will start to pop up. For adolescents, my experience has been, they can relate to an adult parent, they can relate to their adult teachers and other adults in their lives, but probably one of the best approach is teens talking to other teens with the similar issues. And if we can connect teens in that way, it tends to have a more profound effect, because teens relate. Adolescence is a time of your peer group is your primary focus. And my experience has been with proper guidance, teen support groups, even if they're on a telehealth platform, I think would be very beneficial.
Great. Thank you, George. Anna, next question is for you. We're hearing a lot of teachers that are reporting an inordinate amount of time during the online learning is spent helping kids with their stress levels rather than the academic lessons. So what tips can we give teachers to help kids feel comfortable so they can maximize their online learning without having stress interfere with the situation?
All right, thanks, Anthony. Yeah, that's another good question. Teachers, this is a big adjustment for teachers as well. They've had to learn a whole new way of engaging their students and teaching on an online platform. And so, yes, teachers are seeing the stress in their students, and yet they also have the stress of wanting to teach and do the lesson for the day. So I recommend starting each session with a brief stress reduction technique, kind of dealing with it right off the bat. Some things could be having all the students stand up in front of their computer and stretch. One I like is to have everyone laugh out loud for 1 minute. And during these times, that can feel really good. Taking deep breaths with all the students, so something like that to address the stress. So you're validating, I know this is stressful, here are some things you can do, and you're doing it with them, and then going into the lesson. We want to validate the children's feelings and encourage them to talk about their feelings with maybe their parents or their therapists after class. Those are some ideas, and they can even let the students know that trying to get their mind off of the stress and focusing on the lesson at hand can be really helpful. It's a distraction technique. School can be a positive distraction as well. So, yeah, those are some ideas.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Nora, we're going to go to you next. What activities can you recommend to families with small children? How do we teach and communicate with small children? Should we be talking to small children about COVID? Because we don't want to scare young people. What's the appropriate way with our younger children to deal with this COVID crisis?
I think before we even think about how we want to help our young children, we have to check in with ourselves first and see how we're doing. For example, if I'm fearful, my child may feel my anxiety. So even if I say you're safe, everything's good, my child is going to feel that, no, mommy's stressed out. So let's make sure we check in with ourselves and we find our own coping mechanisms so that we're calm and collected, and then approach our children and first ask how much they know. Okay, let's ask them, why aren't you going to school? And just see how much they know. Some kids are hearing little, information from the news, and then they're exaggerating. They're saying everyone's going to die. Or when initially the news only infects older people. I know a lot of my younger clients are concerned about their grandparents. I know the news was intended to say, okay, kids, you're safe, but then a lot of kids are concerned, okay, what if my nana dies, or what if my grandpa dies? So there is definitely fear around it. So we need to educate kids, and there are a lot of cartoons now. I mean, not a lot, but like handful. PBS.org has a cartoon explaining what coronavirus is. So maybe you can watch this as a family and then just talk about it, but don't, listen to the news all day long where they are going to feel your or adults' anxiety or the caretaker's anxiety. So that's very important. And they can draw their feelings. I do a lot of art therapy, even through teletherapy now. I'm doing a lot of art. I'm having them blow bubbles where they can let go of the fearful feeling, whatever it is. And I use the metaphor of, all right, how long did the bubble last? It popped. Okay, that's how much you need to worry about this. It's going to pop. So there are many different, techniques to make sure kids are okay. We can definitely hug our kids to make sure, they're safe and they're loved. Because like I said earlier, they may show their fear in many, many different ways. So we want to make sure, we're there and we're keeping them safe emotionally.
Perfect. Following up on that, how do we deal with the whole idea that school may not go back? Looks like we're going to, not go back to the fall. How do we help kids adjust to that sort of one tangible the constant in their life was getting up and going to school, and now they're not going to school? That's for you, Nora, to follow up.
Yes. So, again, as much as we can, instead of focusing on the loss part of it, we can focus on, yes, it's sad, but this is the best way to keep ourselves safe. So, again, we can choose to be miserable, or we can choose to take this as an opportunity to work on a lot of self-care, try to normalize as much as we can, to adjust. For example, some people say it's not fair, and then we can talk about certain things that we've experienced as adults that may have not been fair. For example, someone at a workplace may have more vacations accumulated because they have seniority. So we can talk about that, okay, I may feel it's not fair, but that's okay. That's how certain things work. So it's being rational, being, as open as we can. And again, I'm going to refer to the plan, praise and participate. As long as we're there, we're connected with our kids, it's easier. I know George mentioned, or Anna mentioned, a lot of kids are, they may be sleeping more, they may be unmotivated. We may also feel like they need their space, which is great. We also need our space as parents. However, it's very important, at least at the end of the day, to connect with one another and to talk about how was your day, what was missing from your day, what would you like to include in your day to make it better tomorrow. And just a lot of, again, self-reflection alongside with mindfulness, so that they don't feel that suppressed frustration and they don't lash out in a harmful or inappropriate manner. So I think, those things are very important. And again, even with teenagers, I think we need to ask them how much they know about this. I mean, I was doing sessions the other day with the family. Kids were saying, okay, I heard on the news 96% of the population is going to get infected. So this kid was losing sleep. She wasn't able to eat. So, okay, how much of that is the truth? So we have to make sure we share some facts and not just follow everything we hear and then get into fear zone. And we can always say we're all in this together. Your friends are also not going anywhere. Your friends are also doing this. And that connection, how can you connect socially? My 13-year-old now is writing letters, for example, to her friends. I think they got tired of the, video chat, and now they're writing letters and actually mailing them. So I think that's a new trend So whatever they can do to adjust, I think, and by using their creativity, it's a plus.
Great. Thank you, Nora. The next question is for Anna and Lara. So one of the biggest challenges for teens is they feel like they've gone through a 2-week self-isolation. Their friends have stayed home for 2 weeks. So now they feel empowered to go out. How do we keep our teens home and understanding that they can't go hang out with their friends during the social distancing? How do we help teens get, sort of understand that and we don't want them sneaking out of the window in the middle of the night to run over to see their girlfriend or their boyfriend and, just dealing with this from a public health perspective. How do we get through to them? Anna and Lara, you want to take that?
Sure. So
yeah, Anna,
yes.
Anna, you go first.
Okay, great. This is something I'm dealing with a lot. It's very tempting for some teens to, they miss their friends, they miss their boyfriends, their girlfriends, they miss them a lot. And also, most teens that I've been talking to are not really concerned about getting the virus themselves. And so that makes this extra challenging. They think, oh, well, I don't care if I get it, right? And we know the teen brain doesn't always think through all of the consequences. Their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. And so they might engage in a bit more of these risky decisions. And so I think it's important to have a conversation with your teen and ask them why they think these rules are in place to stay home. Instead of just setting this firm, this is the rule, this is how it is, engage them in a conversation, help them understand, why the rules are in place, and try to get their agreement that way. And I really encourage all of my teens to hold on to hope that this is temporary. I know we don't have a whole lot of answers, but I think there is still hope that this is temporary, and so that seems to be helpful. Lara?
I think I agree with everything you said. I think it's a tough situation, especially because they're not little children and they're not adults either, so they have a pretty clear understanding of the severity of the situation. But when you're young and your entire world is your social life at that age, it's very tough to have that removed. I think the first thing that parents can do to make a difference is to just be very empathetic and understand, that their kids are going through it too, and it may be a different way, it may be a different situation, but they've got just as big of an emotional world as we do, and I think that's an important one. I think Nora had mentioned scheduling and talking about how to try to keep a routine going. I think that's important. Teaching them, I think, I think also being empathetic to the fact that they are going to be on technology a lot more than we'd like, and just being patient with that is really important, but also coming up with activities that require them to have to unplug. You know what I mean? Where they would have no choice but to engage, and I think they can see that it can actually end up being a very positive experience, when you are trying to make an effort to connect with them. I think some teens, especially the more quiet ones that want to connect, that maybe just don't know how to approach it, would really appreciate that. I think watching out for symptoms of depression is huge, because I know that it can impact kids, right. And I know for some it could also increase their anxiety exponentially, where they're afraid. So right. It's just a matter of creating the conversations. They need the space to process exactly what's happening with them, and it'll also give you the information to kind of see where are their heads at, where are their thoughts at, and that way, when you are going to come up with solutions, you have a better idea of where your kiddo's at, and I think that's important.
Great. Anna, the next question's for you. It's a short question. How do you get a teenager to read a book when the teen doesn't want to listen to their parents asking them to read a book? How do you deal with that practical little situation?
That is a very good question. Yes. So, first of all, as a parent, I encourage you to resist the urge to criticize or to get into a power struggle, because that tends to just make the situation worse, right? Then they just really don't want to do it. So instead, try to connect with your teen. What's getting in the way of reading? Brainstorm why it's important to read. What kinds of things do they like to read? Maybe it's poetry, maybe it's short stories, maybe it's graphic novels. Start with something that they like to read. I know you may have things as parents you want them to read, or schools have things that they want the student to read. But, if you're just trying to encourage your teenager to read and instead of just being online all the time, those are some ideas. Also, model reading. So when they see everyone in the household reading, they see their parents reading, that can be helpful. And if that's not working, audiobooks can also be a great option for some teens. It can be a way to start. Let them listen to some books. And limit distraction during reading time. So if it is reading time, try to, have it quiet, have no technology. And just remember, everyone's brain works a little bit differently, and so we want to connect with them, meet them where they are, and try to creatively come up with strategies to increase reading.
I like the no power struggle.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's important. I have to learn. I have to do better at that one. We're going to move on. George and Nora, you're going to get the next question. We've talked a little bit about structure. Do you guys want to touch? What do we mean by structure? How do we order our day? How formal should the structure be during this time of social distancing? What strategies can we give families to create a workable, positive structure so the day doesn't blend together? George and Nora.
George, you can start.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Nora. I think I said it in some of my other responses. I think daily structure is pivotal. I think families should put together schedules. I don't think they have to be, so rigid that you're planning every minute of every day. But I do believe that there's certain things that should be in the schedule, like daily care, healthy habits. And I also believe some of those schedules should have things about your cultural beliefs, your cultural rituals, and kind of focus on your spiritual, whatever your family's spiritual beliefs are and your spiritual practices. I think they should be built into your weekly schedules. How do we honor? How do we recognize? Schedules are ways of basically addressing anxiety and some anxiousness, because the mind works a certain way. When we have certain practices and habits that we have, it tells the brain that things are kind of in order and we have a certain amount of control of what's happening. So if we build our schedules in a way that keeps conveying the message to ourselves and to the people in our family that we have a way to approach this, and we're going to keep our home in a certain order, and we're going to address the things that need to be done. I also think the schedules should share responsibilities, and even the young children should have a level of responsibility towards the things that have to be done on a daily basis in the home to keep it, healthy and comfortable. It's the washing of dishes, the laundry, the making sure you make your beds every day, making sure you do certain things that we would have normally done. Those could easily slip away at this time, and that's what we're hearing. But they shouldn't. I think we should do those same things to keep reminding ourselves, because it has an effect on how we perceive the control of how we're managing the whole process. So I don't think they need to be very rigid, but I do believe they need to be consistent and always be addressed on a daily basis.
Great. Nora?
All right, and just to add on what George mentioned, I think also our structure needs to be based on goals and we have to do needs assessment. What are my needs today? Why am I going to come up with a structure? What are my goals? Whether for self or for the kids or for the whole family, so that at the end of the day, we are feeling a little bit productive. We are feeling like we achieved some kind of goal, as opposed to just creating a structure because everyone else is creating a structure. So everyone's structure and routine is very different. Just like George mentioned, there is the cultural aspect of each family, or like I said, even needs. Some families who have special needs children, their structure needs to be different, more monotonous than others. So let's just be mindful that we are following a certain goal at the end of the day, and we are feeling successful. And it's totally okay not to follow if you're not feeling motivated to do every single goal in our structure or in our routine, but just, like focusing more on the needs.
Great, thank you. Just to do a time check, we've got about 20 more minutes for our Q&A with about 8 questions left, and then we want to have enough time for some strategies moving forward. So try to, I hate to say it, but we got to be a little bit more succinct if we're going to get all the questions in. We're going to go to Lara and Anna next. What do you think, what do you do if you're working from home and you don't have the ability or the bandwidth to create the structure that we just talked about? In essence, you're still working even though you're home, and you don't want your child just to be unsupervised on the couch all day in front of the TV. What strategies for those hardworking parents who are still working hard even during social isolation to help with their kids' structure?
Laura, why don't you start?
I'm gonna chime in on this one. I feel like, especially as someone who's working from home now, I can see that it's very tough when you're trying to juggle a bunch of things at the same time. I think that one of the things that makes a big difference is understanding that there is no right or wrong answer. There isn't a specific thing you're supposed to do. It isn't like this magic formula. I think that adding more rigidity to this situation may actually cause more stress on top of having to juggle a home working schedule and then also childcare. One of the things I could recommend is maybe like on the weekend, sitting down and just coming up with some staple activities that are definitely going to take place at specific times based on your working schedule, so that there is some semblance of structure where you don't feel like you're needing to, like on the hour, pay attention to everything that's happening. I think also, especially during the days that you have off, coming up and brainstorming some ideas of projects, crafts, things that help them use their imagination or help them create, I think could be really powerful in engaging them. And I think also just understanding that it's about good enough parenting. It isn't about perfect parenting. It's about good enough parenting where, you're doing the very best you can with what you have. And as long as, you're approaching it from that perspective, I think, you're going to be okay. And challenges will happen, and that's what support is out there for. But I think that understanding that there's certain things you still can do that allow that flexibility is important.
Awesome. Anna?
Sure, and I'll just add, that it's okay to embrace technology during this time. I hear of some families where the parent is working, so they'll call their family, friends, or relatives to read a story to their child, or just do a Zoom or FaceTime call. It's kind of like a babysitter through something to engage your child while you're working. I thought that was a great idea. And possibly, setting up the reward system, as we've mentioned, because when, children have goals, they get rewards for good behavior, such as following directions. It can make things go a bit more smoothly. All right.
Great, thank you. George, we're going to skip 17. We're going to go right to 18. George, this is a serious question. It's alarming to see a death graphic on the TV all day. It's continuing counts the number of people who died in real time. How do we discuss this real consequence of COVID with our children? Should we be discussing it, or should we just leave them to see it on their own? Should we be highlighting some of the heroes out there as well as what's going on with the death graphic? What do we do with this stark reality that's on TV all day.
Yeah, extremely difficult. The media can be streaming information and images 24/7. And children, especially, can access so many different ways. A lot of children have their own smartphones, pads, and laptops, and again, this is very challenging. Parents trying to explain what they're seeing is going to be very difficult. I don't think there's going to be absolute great responses or something that's going to cover all situations. I do believe, again, in just opening up the conversation and seeing how your child or how your family members are perceiving what that means, what they're seeing. And I do agree that you do have to talk about how many people are not succumbing to the virus and how many people are coming out of the symptoms and they're getting back on their feet. I think the parents and families should highlight those examples as much as possible, because it's easy to see the negative and see the deaths as inevitable, but it's not necessarily true. The numbers tell us that there's a lot more people that are coming through the process, and they're going back to getting their lives together. I think that's the main objective of all of this, is trying to put out that in the future, when we get down to a certain place, yes, there's going to be some tragedy, and families are going to have their individual tragedies, but overall, our hope, and that's what we want to install, our hope is that most people are going to come out of it, we're going to address it, and we're going to rebuild when we get to another place in time.
Good answer. Anna and Nora, we had a lot of high school seniors who are missing out on graduation, and a lot of classmates missing out on other important milestones. What can we say to comfort these young people, because they're disappointed? How do we handle their disappointment?
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things. It is totally disappointing. We can't disagree with them. Of course it's disappointing. So number one is validation. That is a big word for all of us to remember. When we can't solve our child or teen's problems, we can't fix this, we can validate. Let them know it's hard, and kind of sit with that for a bit. And then when you feel ready, I think it's okay to also encourage them to focus on any positives they can find in their life, what they're grateful for, finding the silver lining, making lemonade out of lemons. But again, first we've got to just validate the difficult feelings.
Great, thank you. Nora? Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I was just going to say pretty much the same thing. For kids, or especially seniors, to be heard that it is difficult and we are here for them and we're going through with them. They're not alone. And really no one knows what's going to happen yet. So we don't have a solution, but we're there and they're not alone. So that's pretty much validation, like Anna said.
Fantastic. The next question is for Lara and Anna. Mm-hmm. We had a mother who wrote in about a daughter who had developed a scalp condition that comes out through stress when she gets nervous and anxious, and she can't go to the dermatologist because of the pandemic. So how do we deal with some of these stress-induced medical issues that can't be treated because of social distancing? And in general, we have other people who are foregoing elective surgeries because the hospitals won't do any elective surgeries, and that has other, depression issues. You guys want to take those two sides of the same question?
Yeah. I mean, just speaking from the medical perspective, I feel like of not getting the treatment that is necessary. And granted, it could be something that's non-urgent, but for a person, obviously, that's a very personal experience that has carried a lot of emotions and a lot of weight, and everything now is on hold. And it's very much similar to the previous question in terms of like experiencing these things that they've been looking forward to, or in this little girl's case where she wants to know what's happening and how to deal with it and make it stop, and it's the most basic thing that she can't get support for right now. I think it's just a matter of, especially if you're a parent to a child, or you're trying to help a family member out, it's just reminding them that this isn't forever. It is very temporary, and just empathizing with the delay that they're experiencing. And I think in this situation where this mom is really trying to help out her kiddo, it's very important to just continually create space where she can share what she's feeling and just let it out of her body, so that she's not continually carrying that stress and sadness.
Great. Anna, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. There definitely is a mind-body connection. Stress does have effects on our body. And so, yes, I know we are seeing a lot of different conditions coming up that might very well be rooted in increased levels of stress and anxiety. So starting a daily practice of mindfulness, I highly recommend it during this time. It can help us weather the storm. And mindfulness truly is a practice. You have to work at it every day, because the mind is stubborn. It keeps wanting you to worry. What can I control? What can I do? And sometimes just quieting the mind, taking some time to be still. And again, those apps that I mentioned, if you're not familiar with mindfulness, Headspace teaches you how to do it, and Calm also, the Calm app. So some really great resources.
Great. George and Anna, we're going to go, maybe George, you can talk about adults, and Anna, you can talk about teens, or whatever you guys, however you want to deal with it. But addictive behaviors are on the rise in teenagers and parents, whether it's alcohol or other addictive issues. What do we do to see the signs of addictive behaviors? How do we interject ourselves, and what should we do about this rise of addictive behaviors?
George, you want to go first? Is he there? Well, I'll go first. Okay.
All right, Anna, you go.
Okay. So, what we know about addiction is many of the underlying mental and emotional issues are often stress, loneliness, depression, boredom, isolation, right? And those feelings are more present now than ever. And so we are seeing an increase in addictive behaviors. And so I encourage finding other ways to cope. Some people find, hot tea can be a great substitute, or like it's a ritual, having some hot tea, going for a walk, doing yoga, really trying to take care of yourself during this time to address those underlying emotional issues. And I do know that AA meetings are still happening through Zoom, which is great. And if it does get really bad and you're very concerned about a loved one, drug and alcohol rehab centers are still open. They're considered essential businesses at the moment. So those are still a resource.
Great. George, did we lose you?
No, I had it on mute. Sorry.
Okay,
I thought I was.
You want to talk about it? You want to talk about addictive behaviors briefly?
And I like what Anna said, and I agree with some of her thoughts about this. And the only thing I'd add is, when you have a loved one that is in an addictive mode, trying to shame or guilt them into stopping usually just doesn't work. The best approach is talk about how it's affecting you, your family, the people around you. And then the other biggest strategy is try to remove all possible means that you're contributing or the home is contributing to their addiction, whether it's through funds, through bringing alcohol or substances into the home, providing some kind of level of access. If you can remove those levels of access, and you can have a process of talking about how it's affecting everybody and encourage them to reach out to the AA organizations and to support groups, might be your best option. In the extreme cases, they need some medical care, and you're going to have to utilize those channels as well. But trying to guilt somebody into stopping doesn't work. You have to approach it in a different way.
Fantastic. Our next question for Nora and Lara. This is a great question. Married couples weren't intended to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with each other. Work would get us out of the house. So how do we, that 24/7 is creating tangible stresses on spouses. How can spouses better cope with each other? Forget the kids for a moment. What do we tell husbands and wives and husbands and husbands and wives and wives? How do we deal with this pandemic so we get along with each other better and not negatively impact the kids? Laura and Lara.
Let me start. Sure, Lara, thank you. So basically, I think, again, this is a change, especially for the couples who are working from home. It's important for us to discuss, again, I'm going to go back to the 3 Ps, plan, praise, and participate. How to plan your day, who's taking the responsibility of watching the kids. And it's okay to have your own space and not be in the same room for a few hours and do your own thing, whether you're, responding to emails or taking phone calls, and then, praise one another that, both of us may not know how to tackle this situation, but I think it's important to be mindful that we're all doing our best, and let's participate in each other's plans, and maybe set some even date time, whether to have some tea or coffee together. But when the tension is there, to recognize the tension and not blame one another. I think blaming needs to stop, and just understanding that no matter how frustrated I may feel, he or she may also feel the same way. And, just understanding that it's not about me right now, it's just about the whole family and our sanity at this time. Laura, you want to add?
Yeah. The one thing I want to say is, when before this pandemic hit, we're always on the go. We're in LA, where it's a much faster paced environment, and now that we've slowed down, it's like we're also being given a really cool opportunity to connect with our partners as well. So while it could be nerve-wracking to be together 24/7, and I think having respite and downtime and saying, you know what, I just need an hour to myself at home. Do you want to walk the dog or take the kids out for a walk, or just splitting that up, I think is really important. And then also planning activities that you're actually going to do together instead of just things that continually separate you. Doing things that are actually planned and involve a little bit of the creativity or teamwork, I think can also help ease some of that tension. So like cooking dinner together, for example, or, if you've got little kids, doing something as a family, like a game or an art project or craft. I think those also can make a very big difference too. But also to schedule good times, not just I need to get away from everything times. You know what I mean? To balance that out a little bit more.
Thank you, guys. Laura, you get the next question. We're getting close on time, so try to give we have 3 questions to get to. Try to be short, the last 3. There's a lot of loss that may not necessarily be to C19. How do we deal with how do we grieve if one of our relatives passes away and we don't get to go to a funeral?
And I think this actually ties really well into what the seniors in high school are experiencing, whereas all these things that they're supposed to be able to do normally, they're not able to do. And I think grieving is a huge one. Not being able to go to viewings, wakes, funerals, churches, temples, synagogues, whatever it is, it's affecting a lot of people. And I think this is one of those rare situations where we don't come across this very often. And one thing people can do in order to mourn a loss or to overcome something that's happened that's tragic is to create your own ritual for it, right? We have all these cultural traditions of like a wake or a funeral, but I'm wondering if there's different ways people can mourn loss in the privacy of their own homes that really honors the person that was gone, but then also creating an opportunity for when this is over to have something to look forward to where you can actually grieve as a community or as a family. So while you're doing something right now to curtail that, that's not to say you can't have a memorial service down the line, and that's not to say that's not something you can't look forward to planning. So I think that makes a big difference too. I think that makes a big difference. So it's just replacing stuff.
Yeah, plan it out for the future and grieve in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Anna, you get the next question. Some people are just feeling sad. They've lost their freedom. They've filed for unemployment. They're sad. They're disappointed. How do we prevent this sadness and disappointment in people, which is justified given the circumstance? How do we prevent it from progressing into depression?
Great question. Yeah, so it's okay to feel sad right now, and I think acknowledging our sadness is a great step in not letting it progress, right? It kind of seems counterintuitive because if we focus on our sadness, we sometimes think, well, that'll make it get worse. But it tends to be the opposite, to acknowledge how we're feeling, and then to also have some tools to help ourselves feel better. I think focusing on what you can control right now. There's a whole lot that we cannot control, like losing our jobs and things like that, but focus on the little things each day that you can control, and also don't be afraid to reach out for help. Video therapy, phone therapy, there are some great options out there right now that I think are really helpful, and so I'd encourage people to reach out for help.
Great. And then, Laura, you're going to get our last prepared question. Who should we worry about? Who's at high risk for depression and other issues? Who should we be worrying about?
Honestly, my first instinct is the people that have lost their jobs and the people whose lives have basically turned upside down from this pandemic, in the sense that, they may have been working somewhere for many years and suddenly they're not able to be there anymore and they're filing for unemployment. I've seen the depression rate for the people who have lost jobs or who have been laid off or who cannot work, and it's astounding. It's also a reason that people commit suicide. So I'm looking at it from a very serious lens of the people that really need that support right now are the people who feel like, what do I do now? What's next? How am I going to pay my bills? What am I going to do to take care of my family or my kids? And just offering as much support to them as possible with your family or your friends, and just letting them know that this will get better. I think that's really important. But definitely that population is the one I'm the most concerned about right now.
Well, we certainly care for those folks, and we know unemployment benefits are at an all-time high, and just if you're in a household with somebody who lost their job, be sensitive. We're going to go into our closing comments. Each of you, thank you everybody for sending those questions. We had so many more, but we just don't have time to answer every one of them. We'll try to send out emails to some folks who have some technical questions, but I do want to give our poor therapists sort of a last opportunity to give us a little bit of hope and give us a path and touch upon things that we may not have touched upon. So, George, you're going to go first. Try to stay, about 2 to 3 minutes. We've got about 15 minutes left. And so, George, you go first.
Yeah, my approach, as I mentioned in the beginning, is build on your family strength. Focus on bonding, loving each other, caring for each other, being conscientious of each other. Put aside your differences as much as you can. Be receptive to how other people are responding. Learn from each other. But the key is build on your family strengths and your family foundation.
Well, thank you, George. Nora, you want to go next?
Sure. So basically, I think it's important for us to recognize that when the children are giving us a hard time, don't feel that they're giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time. So that changes the perspective when we look at it that way. Also, just focus on what are some of the things that are not canceled. I know everyone's talking about a lot of things that are canceled these days, but there are a lot more things that are not canceled, which is the physical, which is the social, interaction, or doing some hobbies at home, spending more time with family members, decluttering, and a lot of different things. And for more resources, Children's Hospital has some resource lists on their website, including for activities for families, including coloring books and, different storybooks related to COVID-19. And just make sure, you're doing a lot of self-care, because that's what's going to keep us strong. And we will be over this, hopefully very soon. And then we're going to look back and, come up with stories. And these are historic times. So let's just be strong and support one another with kindness and, do lots of self-care and understand each other.
Fantastic. Laura, you want to jump in?
Yes, yeah. The one thing I want to leave everybody with is the concept of perspective. In the Chinese culture, the two characters that make up the word crisis are danger and opportunity. And in every crisis, especially as a trauma specialist, I see an opportunity for something good to come out of it as well. And I think if we can stick to that reframe, stick to that perspective, and just keep telling ourselves, first of all, this is temporary, and second, this is an opportunity for me to connect more with my kid or with my spouse or to support a family member. It's a very powerful thing, and in the end, you can end up being much closer than you anticipated, and a really good positive can come out of it. So I think just keeping perspectives in check and remembering that this isn't a forever, situation can make a very big difference.
Fantastic. Anna?
Okay, yes. So there's a lot of things thrown at us each day on the news with families, and it can feel very overwhelming. And so one thing I want people to keep in mind is to try to take things one step at a time, to really, focus on one task at a time. And that's part of mindfulness, right? And don't be afraid to take a moment to listen to the birds sing, watch the clouds pass, find the beauty in each day, find something to be grateful for, and don't forget to breathe. I find myself even holding my breath sometimes, and so maybe everybody at home right now, everyone just take a deep breath, maybe roll your shoulders, It's soothing to the nervous system. If we can do this together, I do believe that. So keep the hope.
Thank you, Anna. Diane, you want to add a closing comment?
Sure thing. I just want to thank everyone for participating. I know I learned a tremendous amount of information today. Just to remind everyone that we have resources available online. Our state website is capta.org, and if you put in -COVID-19, we have resources for parents, for families, for school districts, a variety of resources, art projects, things along those lines, just a variety of things. There's also, if you have any questions, you're welcome to send an email to information@pta1.org, and we'll be glad to get you to the right resource at this time. Thanks again, Senator, and thanks to the therapists that were on the line today.
Thank you, Diane, and it's great to partner with First District PTA again. I learned a lot on this. One thing I will add, something that the Portantino family has done, and I'm going to make them do again tonight, is we played charades last Saturday night and had a lot of laughs. And my daughters beat my wife and I quite handily in charades. So that's another little thing if you want a distraction. I want to thank our, obviously the First District PTA, my staff, and then Laura, Anna, Nora, and George, our four providers. There are resources out there if you need them. Confront things honestly and straightforwardly according to the advice of our therapists that were on the call today. I also want to apologize. We got a lot of questions in on medical issues, and this was more on a mental health, family health forum, not on direct medical questions, so we didn't include those questions that would be better directed towards an MD. I'm going to be hosting some more forums as the pandemic and social distancing continues. So I thought this was a very, very healthy conversation. It'll be available on my website, the State Senate website. So just Google Anthony Portantino and you can get to the website. So if you want to share it with your friends, it has been recorded and is shareable. And again, I just want to say thank you to our therapists, the PTA, and everybody for tuning in on a Saturday morning. And one last thought, if you celebrate Passover, happy Passover, and tomorrow's Easter Sunday, have a safe Easter, and this is a solemn spiritual time as well, and I wish you all well, and thank you for tuning in to this Family Health Forum.